Here we've got a pretty good picture of a circle with equal arcs of with 12 equal arcs around the circle. Each of those arcs is 30 degrees or pi over 6 radians. And we've labeled the angles as they would be counted if we start here and move counterclockwise. The angles 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210, 240, 270, 300, 330, 360 degrees. In each case, there's degrees on those angles. Okay, or pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 6 pi over 6. It's getting monotonous, I know. 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6, 9 pi over 6, 10 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6, and finally 12 pi over 6, which I didn't write, but we know that 12 pi over 6 reduces to 2 pi. And since we've reduced this one, we can go around and reduce all the others that reduce. Pi over 6 doesn't reduce. 2 pi over 6 reduces to pi over 3. 3 pi over 6 reduces to pi over 2, and so forth, getting 2 pi over 3, 5 pi over 6, which doesn't reduce, pi, 7 pi over 6 doesn't reduce, 4 pi over 3 is reduced from 8 pi over 3, etc. So we have these basic angles. Again, we've broken the circle into 12 equal arcs, and we've labeled the angles starting from this point, moving counterclockwise. Now we're going to call this our x-axis. We're going to call this our y-axis. So that each of these points has an x-coordinate. We see the x-coordinates. This circle is assumed to have radius 1, so the x-coordinate is 1 here, about 0.9 here. It is 0.5 here, and we'll see shortly why that's so. 0, negative 0.5, negative 0.9, negative 1. And as we continue around the circle, we go back through negative 0.9, negative 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0.9, 1. And if we continue going around the circle, well, that's going to get awful monotonous, but you can recite it a few times yourself, just to make sure you have the idea. So our x-coordinates behave this way. Our y-coordinates act in a very similar way, except, of course, that we're measuring in this direction, so that if we start here, our y-coordinate is 0. We go up to here, that is 0.5. This is about 0.9. And then we're up to 1. So as we go from 0 to 90 degrees, our y-coordinate goes from 0 to 1. And it goes, if we move in equal increments, it goes from 0 to 0.5 to 0.9 and to 1. And then it starts coming back down. So it goes down to 0.9, 0.5, 0, negative 0.5, negative 0.9, negative 1, negative 0.9, negative 0.5, 0. So along the y-axis, those are the numbers we get. We'll write it down in a minute, but you've already seen that the x-coordinates that we get are the cosines of these angles. The y-coordinates we're going to call the sines of the angles, S-I-N-E, sine.